Hi there, CoC here. In today's video I'll be teaching you how to play Frost Mage in Dragonflight 10.0. If you have Frost Mage in Shadowlands, I'll suggest to skip ahead as the basics will be explained first, as not much has changed besides the AoE rotation. Frost Mage is an agile caster with excellent personal defensives and damage profile suited for any situation. The Frost Mage has to play around 3 primary buffs for the spec to function. The first is Fingers of Frost. This buff appears when you're casting Frostbolt or is gained from pressing Frozen Orb. When you gain this buff, your next Ice Lance is cast to be assumed to be frozen. This increases the damage of your Ice Lance. The second is Brain Freeze. This proc can appear when you're casting Frostbolt or when you press Icy Veins with Snap Freeze. This causes your next flurry to deal 50% increased damage and the next spells to be cast on the target to be as well if the target was frozen. The last one is Shatter. This buff multiplies the crit chance on frozen targets and also additional crit chance. Your basic rotation as a Frost Mage heavily revolves around using Fingers of Frost or Brain Freeze procs accordingly to make your Ice Lances shatter. In general, with the Frost Mage, you know what your next 2 to 3 globals are based on your procs. As a Frost Mage, Frozen Orb is our offensive cooldown, and with a few talent choices makes Frost Mage in cleave or AoE situations extremely strong. Freezing Wind grants Fingers of Frost every 2 seconds. Freezing Rain grants Blizzard when Frozen Orb is down to be instant cast. We haven't talked about Blizzard before, but whenever Blizzard does damage, it reduces the cooldown on Frozen Orb to be reduced by 0.5 seconds. Basically, these 2 talents make your Frozen Orb in AoE extremely potent as you get a lot of Ice Lance procs, while at the same time you also get your Blizzards down for free. In some situations you can even have up to 2 Frozen Orbs at the same time out. During this time you want to be shattering those Frozen Orbs as they do a lot of damage to the pack. You want to be using your Ice Novas, your Frozen Novas, basically everything that freezes the mobs, to then your Blizzards and your Frozen Orbs to be shattering those mobs. This concludes Frost Mage basics. Now for potential builds, there are currently only 2 viable options. An AoE build, likely seen in Mythic Plus, or Cleave fights in Raid that revolves around shattering Big Dick Cone of Golds with Sub-Zero and the Snowstorm combination. With this build, the objective is to get 30 Snowstorm stacks through Blizzard, and then when you have 30 stacks, plant and either use Frost Nova or Ice Nova to freeze the target in place, and then straight after use your Cone of Cold to shatter those. Preferably you want to use this within your Rune of Power window for even additional spell power. Another potent build is the more single target oriented build that heavily revolves around prolonging Icy Veins through Thermal Void, Slick Ice and Freezing Winds at the same time. You can get a lot of procs to then use those procs to prolong your Icy Veins. This one is very similar to Shadowlands. Basically you gain a proc and then you munch a proc. There are 2 other builds, but sadly due to tuning these are not relevant. The Glacial Spike, it heavily revolves around building up icicles to then hardcast this massive Glacial, which will freeze the target in place for 4 seconds and it does single target damage. Sadly it simply doesn't function that well. It does not well in single target or either in AoE, so we're just not using that at all. The last potential build is Cold Storm. You play with Common Storm and Cold Front as your big AoE buttons, but sadly this build, its output is just not there. Similar for the Glacial build, perhaps there are buffs coming in the next week that make these builds viable, but at the moment they're just not worth talking about. Alright, let's talk about gear, Statweights and Consumables. It is always recommended to sim your character in raid bots. Doing so is effortlessly and free at the same time. In general, for stat weight, for any Frost Mage, you're looking for an additional 30 to about 32% crit, and then afterwards you want Mastery. Unless with Icy Veins your character is below 50% to make use of the Sub-Zero build. Followed by Haze equal to Verse. Trigger choices. For the Frost Mage, they're interesting but sadly generally straightforward. You're probably gonna look for the PvP badge, which gives around 500 crit, and then afterwards you want the PvP insignia for 500 haste. Other options include the Horn of Valor for additional Verse, but Verse is not as well in scaling. For your secondary stat deck, you're probably looking at either potentially else your Emerald Coach Whistle for additional mastery procs, Rage Feather for additional single target, or for Eye of Scaffold additional AoE damage. The Eye of Scaffold is also crit, so perhaps if you need more crit from your secondary stat deck, then this would be recommended. Consumables are straightforward from Cloud User. You want about 330 avoidance, rank 3 on your wrist, and graceful avoidance again on your back. You want waking stats on your chest and about 500 spell power and 300 stamina on your legs. Watcher loam on feet, and for rings it depends on the stat weight we talked about earlier. It could be full crit gem and enchants, or it could be mastery or haste, so make sure to sim your character. For main hand we want Sophic Devotion, rank 3, granting about 750 intellect for 15 seconds. Our potion of choice will be Elemental Potion of Ultimate Power, rank 3. For the flasks, either Vial of Glacial Fury or Vial of Elemental Chaos. Both are fine, they increase throughput. For our healing potion we want Refreshing Healing Potion, rank 3. And for our food we want a Grand Bouquet of CoC to increase our main stat. Some useful tips to end this video off. Since Blizzard is a ground effect spell, it's highly recommended to use a cast cursor macro. It's very easy to use. And then also start using a focus mouse over macro. Add a kick focus macro during Mythic Plus. It can get quite hectic having a macro for your focus target to kick while you're shattering your prayer target. It's very useful. With this we'll end the guide there. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, potentially learned how to play Frost Mage. Potentially even main Frost Mage. I will definitely main Frost Mage currently for Dragonflight Season 1 in Mythic Plus. Thank you guys so much for watching again.